Well, in honor of Halloween weekend festivities, we've got a special treat for you today. We're going to be talking about bats, and bats are on everybody's mind because they're an integral part of Halloween decorating. But you may not know that they're also a very good addition to the landscape. And with us today is Melinda Hickman from the Department of Wildlife. Melinda, thank you so much for coming over.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of bats around, and usually you see them in a scary context, but they're actually great for us, aren't they?
Yes, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to set some of the myths straight, because they are very beneficial. They're not the scary, blood-sucking animals that we've been brought up to believe. They're actually very cute when you get up close to them.
Now, I don't know if we'll be able to convince everyone of that today, but
Probably not.
I bet we'll be able to convince them that they are beneficial.
Yes, yes.
And first of all, there are ways to attract bats, but why would you want to attract a bat?
Great. First is for your own comfort, because the bats are mammals. They fly. They're the only predator of night-flying insects that we have for North America, Canada, Mexico. So, for example, little brown bats have been documented to consume 600 mosquitoes in an hour.
Oh my
So if they forage for 5 hours in a night, that's 3,000 mosquitoes in one night. So that helps us with our comfort zone. But second, for a gardener, the benefits are tremendous. The bats in Oklahoma particularly, there's 22 different kinds, by the way, they consume cucumber beetles, the corn earworm, which of course moths when they're adults. There are a multitude, June beetles, old squash bugs, those kind of things that cause tremendous damage to our crops. They consume the adults of those species, so very tremendous benefit.
That's great. That's a very good thing to know. Now, if you want to try, can anybody just start attracting bats, or do you need to kind of assess the situation?
Brenda, I wish it was that easy. Unlike birds, where you can put up a house or a feeder, you'll at least get house sparrows. But with bats, it is very different. And the first thing we would like to have people do is assess their property. And we can start right here on the gardens if you would like, and show people what to look for.
Great. Now, we actually have a bat house up here already, and maybe you could go over some of the things that one should look for.
This is perfect. You guys did great. First of all, the very first thing is that you need to be within a quarter mile of a permanent source of water. Now, you've got Stillwater Creek that runs very close here, and what that's doing is providing aquatic insects, which is also obviously mosquitoes, a very important part of the food source. They need a certain amount of insects to survive. In fact, they have to eat half of their body weight every night just to survive.
Wow.
So they're very voracious eaters. So you've got that, you've got a permanent source of water close by. Second, you've got the house very high up. That's important. We recommend at least 15 feet above the ground. The reason for that is bats need drop to be able to get lift, to be able to fly. So that's why the height of the box. Plus there is some concern for predators. So the higher the box is, then maybe that would deter climbing predators such as your raccoons, maybe even your snakes. So high up is great. Second, you have it in a nice sunny location. Early on in the bat conservation, we thought that for where we are in Oklahoma, or most of the latitude that Oklahoma is in, that you needed 4 hours of direct sunlight, no more, no less. Well, continued research has shown that bats like it hot. So, as much solar radiation as possible is good, and you're in a perfect situation for that on a pole out in the open.
Great.
Your box design is perfect, and we'll talk more about that. You've met all the criteria. Hopefully there's enough insects in the area, and there's not a lot of pesticide use, and you should be getting bats here.
Great. We'll be looking forward to it. So now you've got a box over
Yes.
here. Maybe we could go over that a little bit.
Okay.
Now, you had talked about a little bit earlier about things have changed, and even some of your recommendations have changed, and the reason is just more research?
More research, and that is thanks to Bat Conservation International. They're out of Austin, Texas, and they're made up of bat scientists and volunteers from all over the world, and with more and more people putting up bat houses, we're learning more and more about what works. And you're right, when the Wildlife Department first offered bat houses, we had a different design than the one we'll show you today. Just learning what works. Now, there are a lot of bat houses on the market now, and what I'd like to encourage people to do is look for these few things, and this will help increase their chances of getting bats to their property. First, you want a tall, narrow design. Now the reason for that is going back to that temperature, finding out how important that is. When you have a tall, narrow design, you create a temperature gradient inside the box. So during the day when the bats are resting, they can move up into the top part where it's going to be warmer, or work their way down for a little bit cooler temperatures. In fact, another way to increase the chances of bats would be to put 2 or 3 of these houses up, and they can move from one to the other throughout the daytime to get just the temperature they want.
Okay.
We're talking about temperatures between 85 and 100 degrees.
Okay.
So the second thing that you would need to look for, and this is a relatively new feature, is this vent. The vent is really important now, particularly in Oklahoma where we do have the hot summers. This helps keep it from overheating inside.
Okay.
So if you have a bat house narrow like this, but it does not have a vent, you can of course modify that to get a vent there. Now another feature, which is not on this one because it's a new idea that has come out that seems to help attract bats, is to have a longer back piece here. Normally what bats do is they land either on the front of the box or down below, and they crawl up through the opening down here. They find that the longer this back piece is, the nicer it is for the bats. They seem to prefer that more. And now that also leads to the next thing that you really need to look for in the bat houses. This opening where they would crawl in should not be any more than 3/4 of an inch wide.
Oh, wow.
That again helps maintain a temperature gradient inside. They want to snuggle into something, so they like a little narrow opening. Also, what it's shown is for the paper wasp, which is something you might have to deal with. Paper wasps don't seem to like an opening 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. They like a wider space.
Okay.
So it might help deter paper wasps. You probably might get mud daubers though, and what you would need to do early in the season, say maybe starting the 1st of April, or whenever you first see the mud daubers start to go inside, is take a high pressure hose and knock them out of there. You're going to need to do that for about 3 weeks to discourage them, and then they'll move on.
Okay. Well, this is a nice design. And can people get instructions on how to make this from you?
Yes, we have at the Wildlife Department, we do have a brochure on Oklahoma bats, and it does have, let me open it up here, instructions on how to build just this box that you see here.
Great.
Now this is an older brochure, so some of the information I've just told you isn't in here yet. It needs to be revised. But if anyone would call and visit with us, we'll give them even more ideas on what to do, how to get attract bats to your property. Now Brenda, people could put up the bat houses and they might not get bats. And what we would suggest doing is give it a couple of summers. If they have not had bats in the house, move it around, move the box around, play with it, group them a little differently maybe. It could be just a matter of a couple of feet that will be all it takes to have something that is really attractive to them.
So it takes a little bit of persistence.
It does.
Attractive.
I've had one up for 6 years now, and to my knowledge I've not had bats in it, but it's there if it's needed. It makes a great conversation piece, so you can start to talk to people about bat conservation. One thing too, Brenda, I forgot to mention is some people put these in trees. We would strongly discourage that. The bats need an unobstructed pathway to the box itself, so the limbs will get in the way. Also, you're going to get predators that are going to climb the trees, your black rat snakes. There's even been documentation of squirrels pulling out bats from these bat houses. So a side of the building or on the pole like you have here is ideal.
Okay. Now sometimes people run into problems with bats nesting where they don't want them. What should they do if they have that problem?
You know, it's funny, that is a problem for some, and other times we get calls of where can we buy some bats to put in our yard. But when you do have bats like in your attic or in a school building where the accumulation of their droppings can be a problem, you need to call Animal Damage Control. That is a federal agency that deals with wildlife problems. When you look up their number, you might look under Animal Damage Control or Wildlife Services. Both names would probably work. And they are trained to go out and assess the area. There are times of year when you should do this and times of year when you should not. But they know how to deal with that situation. And in fact, there's been a lot of documentation that shows putting up bat houses adjacent to an area where they're not wanted. When they're moved out, they take to these boxes very quickly.
Okay, so that's the best way to deal with it.
That's the best way. Call the federal agency.
Okay. Well, Melinda, we really appreciate this, and if people want to know more, you've got plenty of information.
Yes,
give you a call.
Give us a call. We have some brochures, we have some books that we can recommend to them. Bat Conservation International has a catalog that you can get from their website or call in a 1-800 number, and they have a lot of more information for all over the country.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been very educational.
Well, thank you. I love being here.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.